Hello, friends. We are very interested to know which cities you are listening to us from. So quickly like and write in the comments where you are from. Also, share what shocking stories happened in your city or maybe even with you personally. Subscribe because the next story could be about your city or even your personal drama. Now let's dive into a new exciting story. The morning air in Phoenix was heavy, thick with dust and heat, despite the early hour. The sun was just beginning its path above the horizon, painting the sky pale pink, but the asphalt was already giving off heat like a hot frying pan. Caitlin Reed stood at the gates of the Women's Correctional Facility, clutching a tattered plastic bag containing personal belongings, a couple of t-shirts, faded jeans, a toothbrush, and a tattered notebook that she had been keeping for the past months. Her dark hair, once shiny and neatly styled, was now pulled back into a loose ponytail, and her skin looked pale, almost gray, after 6 years without sun. She blinked, trying to adjust to the bright light, and felt her throat tighten with a strange mixture of relief and fear. The gate behind her clanged, closing with a heavy metallic sound that she had heard every day for 2190 days. This sound was her alarm clock, her signal to hang up, her reminder that she was prisoner number 47219. But now it sounded for the last time, and Kate suddenly realized that she did not know what to do next. She stood frozen, looking at the empty parking lot in front of the prison, where there was not a single car, not a single person waiting for her. Nobody came. Not his mother, not his old friends, not Matt. Especially not Matt. "Hey, are you coming, or are you going to freeze here?" The voice of the guard standing at the gate was rude, but not angry. A woman of about 40, with short gray hair and tired eyes, was holding a folder with Kate's documents in her hands. "Your bus is in 10 minutes, at a stop 2 blocks away. Don't be late, Reed, or you'll spend the night on the street." Kate nodded without looking at her and adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. Her feet, shod in the cheap sneakers they had been given in prison, seemed alien when she took her first step. Each step resonated in the body with a slight trembling, not from the cold, but from the realization that there were no longer walls, bars, or cells behind her. The freedom was as overwhelming as a blow, and she didn't know if she was ready for it. "Thank you," she muttered, without turning around, and walked forward, feeling the guard's gaze following her. She didn't want to look back. Prison was to be left behind, like a bad dream she hoped to forget. But deep down she knew that she couldn't forget. Not after everything she's done. The stop was empty, except for an old man in a shabby hat who was dozing on a bench, hugging a plastic bottle of water. Kate sat down at the other end of the bench, away from him, and placed the bag on her lap. Her fingers nervously fiddled with the edge of the bag while she looked at the road, where a bus appeared in the distance, an old one, with peeling blue paint and cloudy windows. He took her to the Resocialization Center, St. Mary's Haven, the location the court assigned her as a condition of her parole. 6 years in prison were reduced to 4.5 for good behavior, but freedom was still conditional therapy, reports, strict supervision. Kate didn't know what to expect from the shelter, but the word shelter sounded like a joke. She didn't need shelter. She didn't even know what. The bus stopped with a hiss and Kate stood up, glancing at the old man who still hadn't woken up. She entered, paying the last $2 of those given upon release, and sat down by the window, pressing her forehead to the cool glass. Phoenix flashed outside the window, familiar, but alien. Shopping centers, palm trees, fast food signs, billboards with smiling families. All this was her life once before she decided that she deserved more. Before she betrayed Matt. Next, St. Mary's Haven, the driver announced, and Kate winced, looking up from the glass. She grabbed the bag and walked out, finding herself in front of a low building with white walls and a red-tiled roof. The sign at the entrance read, "Welcome to your new start." Kate snorted, feeling a bitter laugh catch in her throat. New start. As if someone like her could just start over. The inside smelled of disinfectant and coffee, and the lobby was noisy women, ranging from 20 to 60, sat on plastic chairs, filling out forms or talking to volunteers in blue vests. Kate stopped at the counter, where a woman with short black hair and an administrator badge smiled at her as if they were old friends. "Caitlin Reed," she asked, looking at the tablet. "Welcome. I'm Marge. I'll help you get settled. Do you have the documents with you?" Kate nodded, pulling out a folded sheet from the bag, her release, conditions of supervision, direction to the shelter. Marge scanned the paper. Her smile did not waver, but Kate felt like she was being studied. She was used to these looks in prison, a mixture of curiosity and condemnation. People always wanted to know what you did to get here. "Great," Marge said, stamping the document. "Your room is on the second floor, a dormitory for new students. Lunch is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and at 3 you have an appointment with Dr. Harper, your psychotherapist. Don't be late, she is strict but fair. Any questions?" Kate shook her head, although there were a million questions. What am I doing here? How to live further? Who am I now? But she simply took the key that Marge handed her and walked towards the stairs, feeling the eyes of the other women following her. Her footsteps echoed down the hallway, and every sound seemed too loud, too real. The room was small: 2 beds, a wardrobe, a table, a window overlooking a dusty courtyard. Her neighbor, a woman in her 40s with a tattoo on her neck and short red hair, was sitting on one of the beds, leafing through a magazine. She looked up as Kate entered, and her lips curled into a slight smirk. "New girl?" she asked, putting down the magazine. "I'm Tess. What did you sit for?" Kate froze, her fingers tightening on the strap of her bag. In prison, this question was a ritual, but here it cut like a knife. She didn't want to answer, didn't want her story to define her again. "Slander," she said briefly, placing the package on the free bed. "And you?" Tess laughed. Her laugh was hoarse, like a smoker's. "Illicit substances," she said with a shrug. "We were caught with a couple of pieces worth of goods. Nothing new. Advice: don't lie to Harper. She sees right through you." Kate nodded without looking at her and began to sort things out, although there were so few of them that it took less than a minute. She sat down on the bed, feeling the mattress sag beneath her, and stared out the window. The yard was empty, only the wind blew dust across the asphalt. Her thoughts were confused: prison, Matt, Dan, court. All this seemed distant, like someone else's life, but at the same time it weighed on me like a stone on my chest. At 3 o'clock, she knocked on the door to Dr. Harper's office, feeling her heart pounding. The sign read, "Dr. Allison Harper, licensed psychotherapist." Kate expected to see a stern woman in a formal suit, but instead she was greeted by a figure in a loose linen shirt and jeans, with gray hair pulled back into a low bun. Dr. Harper was in her 50s, with warm brown eyes and a slight smile that seemed sincere but wary. "Caitlin, right?" she said, pointing to the chair opposite the table. "Sit down, get comfortable. Tea, coffee, water." "Water," Kate answered, sitting down. Her voice was hoarse, as if she hadn't spoken all day. She took the bottle Harper placed in front of her, but didn't open it, just squeezed it in her hands, feeling the coldness of the plastic. Harper sat down, putting the notebook in front of her, but didn't open it, just looked at Kate, her gaze soft but penetrating. "First day of freedom," she said, leaning a little closer. "How do you feel?" Kate shrugged, her fingers nervously twisting the bottle cap. "It's strange," she said. "I don't know what to expect. Everything is too big, too much light." Harper nodded, her smile growing a little wider. "It's normal," she said. 6 years in a cage changes perceptions. But you are here, and this is already a step. Tell me how you feel right now." Kate frowned, her lips pursing. She didn't want to delve into feelings. It was like opening a box full of snakes. But Harper's gaze was insistent, and she realized that it would not be possible to remain silent. "Anger," she said finally, her voice becoming harsher. "On myself, on everyone, and fear that I can't handle it, that it's all in vain." "In vain?" Harper asked. Her tone was calm, but there was a sense of challenge in it. "Do you mean freedom, or what brought you here?" Kate froze, feeling the question hit home. She wanted to lie, to say something neutral, but the words came out on their own. "What I did," she said quietly, looking at the floor. I destroyed everything. Your life, his life, and I don't know how to live with this. Harper nodded, her face remaining neutral, but there was something warm, almost sympathetic, in her eyes. His name is Matthew, right? She asked, and Kate winced when she heard his name. Judging by your file, you were married. Do you want to tell us how it all started? Not about what happened in court, but about you. Who were you before all this? Kate squeezed the bottle so hard that the plastic cracked. She didn't want to talk about Matt, didn't want to remember his face calm, with slight wrinkles around his eyes when he smiled. But Harper waited, and Kate realized that this was not a request, but a condition. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, where the fan lazily turned its blades. We met 12 years ago, she began, her voice quiet, almost mechanical. At a party with friends, I was young, ambitious, just starting out in marketing. He was Matt, engineer, calm, reliable, always with that stupid smile as if everything in the world can be fixed. She fell silent, feeling her throat tighten. Harper leaned closer, her voice softer. What was he like for you then? She asked. Not now, but at that moment when you first saw him. Kate closed her eyes, and her memory brought back an image, a noisy living room, the smell of beer and pizza, music pouring from the speakers. She is in a red dress, with a glass of wine, arguing with someone about advertising, and he is standing in the corner in jeans and a plaid shirt, looking at her with slight surprise. He was different, she said, her voice wavering. Not like all those guys who tried to get me into bed in 5 minutes. He listened. He asked why I hate shopping centers so much. I was talking some nonsense then, and he just nodded as if it was important. I thought he was boring, but he was. Warm, like a home you want to return to. Harper nodded, her fingers finally touching the pad, but she didn't write anything down. And you came back, she said. You got married. What has changed? Kate opened her eyes, her gaze becoming harder. She straightened up, feeling the old anger rising from the depths. I have changed, she said, her voice becoming colder. I wanted more. A career, success, a life where I'm not just the wife of an engineer in the suburbs. And he was pleased. House, dinner, drawings. That was enough for him. But I don't. Harper looked at her. Her gaze was calm, but there was a sense of strength in it. And you decided that he was holding you? She asked. That he is an obstacle. Kate pursed her lips, her fingers digging into the bottle. She didn't want to answer, but Harper's words hit home, and she felt something crack inside. Yes, she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. I thought he was pulling me back. That without him I will be freer, more successful. I was wrong. Harper leaned back in her chair, her face thoughtful. It's a big step to admit a mistake, she said. But you weren't just wrong, Caitlin. You ruined his life, and yours. Why? What prompted you to do this? Kate froze, her breathing becoming uneven. She wanted to get up, leave, hide from this question, but the office was too small, and Harper's gaze was too heavy. Dan, she finally said, her voice full of bitterness, my boss. He made me feel like I could be more, that I deserve more, and I believed it. Harper nodded, her fingers finally touching the pen, but she still didn't write. Tell me about Dan, she said, and about how you got to what happened in court. Take your time. We'll talk about this for a long time, Caitlin. This is your story, and I want to hear it. Kate looked at her, feeling tears sting her eyes, but she swallowed them down, refusing to cry. She didn't cry in prison, she didn't cry at trial, and she wasn't going to start now. But Harper's words opened something inside, and she realized that she could not remain silent. Not here, not now. Okay, she said, her voice hoarse but firm. I'll tell you, but don't expect me to like it. Harper smiled, her smile was soft, but there was a sense of strength in it. I don't expect you to like it, she said. I expect you to be honest. That's all I need. Kate nodded, her fingers finally letting go of the bottle, and she set it down on the table. She didn't know where to start, but her memory was already pulling her back to the day when she first felt that Matt was not her destiny, but a chain. And she began to speak, slowly, with pauses, feeling how each word cuts her from the inside. I loved him, she said, her voice trembling. For real. But then I wanted to be someone else, and I decided that he was what was bothering me. I was wrong, Dr. Tinlord, how wrong I was. She fell silent, looking at Harper, and for the first time in years, she felt that someone was listening to her, not to judge her, but to understand. And it hurt more than she expected. Morning at St. Mary's Haven began with a sharp knock on the door, which jerked Caitlin out of a restless sleep. She blinked, trying to figure out where she was, and immediately felt the mattress creaking beneath her, and the smell of disinfection and old linen hit her nose. It was not a prison, the bed was softer, and the air was not saturated with dampness, but the feeling of a cage still remained. Kate sat up, rubbing her eyes, and glanced at her neighbor Tess, who was already standing in front of the mirror, combing her short red hair with a plastic comb. "Get up, princess," Tess said without turning around. Her voice was hoarse, with a hint of mockery. "Breakfast in 15 minutes. If you're late, you'll be left with dry toast." Kate nodded, her throat as dry as the desert outside. She stood up, feeling her body aching from the unusual softness of the bed, and reached for her bag of things. There was little there, a couple of t-shirts, jeans, cheap soap that was given out in prison. She chose a gray t-shirt, pulled on a pair of jeans, and glanced at the small mirror above the sink. The face looking at her was alien pale, with dark circles under the eyes and fine wrinkles that were not there before. Her green eyes, once bright, now seemed dull, like faded paint. She turned away, not wanting to see herself any longer. "Are you always so silent?" Tess asked, throwing the comb on the shelf. "Or is it because it just came out yesterday?" Kate shrugged without looking at her. "I don't like talking in the morning," she said, her voice low, almost lifeless. "Are you always so curious?" Tess laughed. Her laughter was sharp, like the sound of glass on metal. "Spot on," she said, putting on a worn leather jacket. "Curiosity is my sin. But don't be afraid, I'm not a cop. I just want to know who I'm sharing a room with." "Slander, you say? Did she lie to someone?" Kate froze, her fingers gripping the hem of her t-shirt. The question was simple, but it cut like a knife, reminding her of what she was trying to lock away in the far corner of her mind. "Something like that," she said, turning to the window. "I don't want to talk about it." Tess raised her eyebrows, but did not insist. "Okay, whatever you say," she said, opening the door. "But everything will come out here anyway, especially with Harper. Let's go, or Marge will give a lecture on punctuality." Kate followed, feeling her heartbeat a little faster. The dining room was on the ground floor, in a large hall with long tables and plastic chairs. The smell of oatmeal, burnt bacon, and coffee filled the air, and the voices of about 30 women, young and old, formed a hum that reminded Kate of a prison block. She took the tray, on which the volunteer in the blue vest had placed a bowl of oatmeal, a piece of bread, and a cup of coffee, and sat down in the far corner, away from the others. Tess plopped down opposite her. Her tray was full 2 pieces of bread, oatmeal, and even an apple, which she had clearly stolen from someone else's table. "Not bad for the first day," she said, nodding at the food. "They probably fed you worse in prison." Kate looked at her, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Not really," she said, stirring the oatmeal with a spoon. "There were potatoes instead of oatmeal, and the coffee is thinner." Tess chuckled, taking a bite of her apple. "It's fun," she said. "I thought you were one of those people who is used to lattes and croissants. You look, you know, like an office girl who has ended up in the wrong place." Kate felt her cheeks burn. Tess had hit the nail on the head, and it made her angry. She was that office girl, the marketer, the manager, the woman who picked out shoes to match her bag and drank lattes before meetings. But that was before everything, until Matt, until Dan, before prison. "People change," she said, her voice cold. "Even office girls." Tess raised her hands in a playful gesture of surrender. "No offense," she said. "Just trying to get you to talk. It's boring here if you don't chat. And you don't seem to be the type to share." "You're right," Kate said, taking a sip of her coffee. It was bitter, almost like prison, but warm, and it was a little calming. I don't share. Tess shrugged and switched to her oatmeal, and Kate looked out the window, where the sun was already rising higher, flooding the yard with golden light. Her thoughts swirled around yesterday's session with Dr. Harper. Tell me who you were before this. She started talking about Matt, but stopped short of getting to the point. There was group therapy at 10 this morning, and Kate knew Harper wouldn't let her keep quiet. This thought frightened me, but at the same time it pulled me like a magnet. She wanted to talk and was afraid of it. Hey, Reed, the voice of Marge, the administrator, pulled her out of her thoughts. Kate turned around and saw a woman standing at the entrance to the dining room, holding a tablet. Group therapy in half an hour. Hall number 3, don't be late. Kate nodded, feeling her stomach tighten. Tess looked at her, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. First group, she asked. Oh, hold on. Everything there is like a confession. Harper will turn you inside out. Thank you for your support, Kate muttered, standing up. She threw the half-eaten oatmeal into the trash and walked towards the exit, feeling the gazes of the other women following her. Her steps were fast, almost panicky, as if she could run away from what was waiting for her in hall number 3. The group therapy room was small, with a circle of plastic chairs in the middle and the windows covered with thin white curtains. The light was soft, but Kate still felt like she was under a spotlight. There were already 6 women in the room, including Tess, who took a chair by the window and winked at Kate as she entered. Dr. Harper stood in front of a chalkboard with the words, "Honesty is the first step," written in chalk. Kate snorted to herself, but sat down, choosing a chair away from the others. Good morning, Harper said, her voice warm but firm. She glanced around the group, lingering on Kate a little longer. We have a new girl today, Caitlin. Let's start with the dating circle. A name, a little about yourself, and one word that describes how you are feeling today. Kate clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She hated such games, but knew that she wouldn't be able to get out. The women began to talk, some briefly, some long. Tess, oddly enough, was laconic. Tess, she said, leaning back in her chair, I was imprisoned for prohibited substances. I feel alive. Kate looked at her, surprised by the word, alive. She hadn't felt alive for a long time. When it was her turn, she stood up, feeling all eyes on her. Caitlin, she said, her voice quiet but even. I was imprisoned for slander. I feel lost. Harper nodded, her eyes alert. Thank you, Caitlin, she said. Lost is an honest feeling. Today we will talk about what brought us here. Not about crimes, but about solutions. Who wants to start? A woman of about 30, with long black hair and a scar on her cheek, raised her hand. Her name was Rose, and she was in prison for theft. I stole because I wanted a better life for my children, she said, her voice shaking. But I just ruined everything. Now they are with their mother-in-law, and I am here. Kate listened, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She remembered the evening when she first met Matt. It was as clear as if it was yesterday, the noisy party, the smell of beer, her red dress, which she chose to stand out. He stood against the wall, holding a bottle of beer, and looked at her while she was arguing with some guy about how to build brands. Her voice was loud and confident then, and his gaze was calm, almost warm. She approached him just to see if she could get him to talk. Are you always this quiet? She asked then, leaning a little closer so that her voice could break through the music. He smiled, and that smile was like a ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. Only when there's someone nearby who speaks for two, he answered, and she laughed, for the first time that evening feeling not like she was on stage, but just herself. Caitlin, Harper's voice pulled her out of her memories. Are you with us? Kate blinked, feeling her cheeks heat up. Everyone was looking at her, and she realized that she had missed someone's story. Yes, she said, her voice hoarse. Sorry. Harper looked at her, her gaze soft but persistent. Do you want to share? She asked. We talked about solutions. What was your first step to where you ended up? Kate pursed her lips, her fingers digging into the edge of the chair. She didn't want to talk, didn't want to open this wound in front of everyone. But Harper's eyes were like a magnet, and she felt that she could not remain silent. I, I decided I deserved better, she said finally, her voice quiet but bitter. I had a husband. Good, too good, but I wanted a career, money, something. More. And I started deceiving him. Tess raised her eyebrows, her gaze becoming sharper. Deceive? She asked again. Like, cheated? Kate shook her head, her eyes falling to the floor. Not only that, she said, I, I did worse. I accused him of something he didn't do. To leave. To take everything. The hall fell silent, and Kate felt the air become heavy. Rose looked at her eyes full of condemnation, and the other woman, older with gray hair, shook her head. That's mean, Rose said, her voice harsh. Why do this to my husband? Kate looked up, her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. Because I was selfish, she said, her voice growing louder. Because I thought he was bothering me. I was wrong, okay? I know I did. Harper raised her hand, her gesture calm but firm. That's enough, she said. Rose, we don't judge. Caitlin, you took a step by saying that. But I want you to think, what pushed you to do this? Not Dan, not your career, but you. What were you looking for? Kate froze, her breathing becoming uneven. She wanted to scream that she didn't know, that it was a mistake, that she was stupid. But instead, she remembered the evening when Matt first brought her to their new house small, with a shabby porch and a courtyard where she tried to plant flowers. This is ours, he said then, his voice full of pride. We'll make it a home, Kate. Together. She smiled then, but inside she felt a pang of irritation. House. Together. This was not what she wanted. She wanted an office with a view of the city, cocktails in expensive bars, people who look at her with admiration. And Matt, he was too simple, too real. I was looking for myself, she finally said, her voice almost a whisper. But I lost everything. Harper nodded, her face thoughtful. This is the beginning, she said. We'll get back to this, Caitlin. But you took a step. The session ended after an hour, but Kate felt like she had run a marathon. She left the hall, ignoring the looks of the other women, and went to her room, where she collapsed on the bed, looking at the ceiling. Tess came in a couple of minutes later, her steps light, almost mocking. Well, did you survive? She asked, sitting down on her bed. You almost cried there, Reed. Kate turned to her eyes cold. It's none of your business, she said. Leave me alone. Tess laughed, but there was no malice in her laughter. Okay, she said, but you know, Harper is right. You don't hide. Not here, and not from myself. Kate didn't answer, turning to the window. She thought about Matt, about the way he looked at her that first night when they danced in the kitchen to the old song he played on his phone. You are my luck, he said then, hugging her to him. She laughed then, but didn't believe it. And now, lying on the creaky bed in the shelter, she realized that he was right. And that was the most painful thing. Morning at St. Mary's Haven was just as stuffy as yesterday, but Caitlin was already starting to get used to the rhythm of this place. The noise of footsteps in the corridor, the smell of coffee coming from the cafeteria, and Marge's sharp voice reminding her of the schedule became part of her new reality. She lay on the bed, looking at the ceiling, where a crack in the plaster resembled a crooked river. Tess had already left for her morning job. She was helping out at the laundry to earn a few dollars, and Kate was left alone, feeling like she could breathe for the first time in 2 days. But the silence was deceptive. Her thoughts were swirling around yesterday's group therapy, where she had said the word deception out loud for the first time. This word, like acid, corroded her from the inside, and she did not know how to cope with it. Kate stood up, pulled on yesterday's t-shirt and jeans, and looked in the mirror. Her face still seemed alien pale, with shadows under her eyes, but today she noticed something new in her green eyes. Not brightness as before, but a spark, a mixture of anger and determination. She didn't know where it came from, but this feeling was frightening and attractive at the same time. Today at 11, there was another group session with Dr. Harper, and Kate could already feel her stomach tightening with anticipation. Harper wouldn't let her hide, and Kate hated her for it. But at the same time, she wanted to return to that hall. She wanted to speak, even if every word was like a blow. She went down to the dining room, where it was already crowded. Women sat at tables, some chatted, some ate silently, and volunteers in blue vests poured coffee and served oatmeal. Kate took the tray and sat in the same corner as yesterday, hoping to remain unnoticed. But Tess, as luck would have it, appeared out of nowhere and plopped down opposite, holding a mug of coffee and an apple, which, apparently, she stole again. "Morning, Reed," she said, her voice cheerful despite the early hour. "You look like you've been talking to ghosts all night. Did you think about your husband again?" Kate frowned, her fingers tightening around the spoon. "It's none of your business," she said, stirring the oatmeal, which had already cooled. "And stop coming to me with questions." Tess laughed. Her laugh was hoarse, but not evil. "Oh, how prickly we are," she said, biting into an apple. "Relax, I'm not a cop. It's just boring here, but you're interesting. Slander doesn't happen every day. Tell me how you got to this point. What did he do to you, this husband of yours?" Kate looked at her, her eyes narrowed. She wanted to get up and leave, but something in Tess's tone, not judgment, but curiosity, made her stay. "He didn't do anything," she said, her voice cold but with a crack in it. "I ruined everything. Are you satisfied?" Tess raised her eyebrows, her gaze becoming sharper. "Wow," she said, leaning back in her chair. "Honestly, I didn't expect it. I thought you were going to say that he was an asshole, that he beat you or something. And you just take the blame on yourself. Is this how Harper affects you?" Kate pursed her lips, her fingers digging into the spoon. She didn't want to talk about Harper, about Matt, about what she had done. But Tess was looking at her, and Kate suddenly realized that her silence was only making everything worse. "Not Harper," she said finally, her voice becoming quieter. "It's just, I'm tired of pretending that it's not my fault. But that doesn't mean I want to talk about it." Tess nodded, her face becoming more serious. "I understand," she said. "But you know, everyone here goes through this. At first you think that you can keep everything inside, and then bang, and you cry in the group, like Rose yesterday. Better start talking before you burst." Kate snorted, but something stirred in her chest. Tess was right, and it made her angry. She put the spoon down and looked at it, her gaze firm. "Okay," she said. "Do you want to know? I set my husband up. She said that he beat me, although he didn't even raise his voice at me. For the sake of money, for the sake of the house, for the sake of freedom. This is who I am. Now leave me alone." Tess froze, her apple stopping halfway to her mouth. She looked at Kate, and something like respect flashed in her eyes. "Damn," she said quietly. "This is tough. But you know, at least you're honest. Most people here would lie to the last." Kate shrugged, her throat tightening. "Honesty doesn't help," she said, looking away. "Not when you've already destroyed everything." Tess was about to respond, but Marge appeared at their table, holding a tablet. "Read, group in 20 minutes, she said, her voice stern. "And don't forget about meeting Harper at 2. She wants to see progress." Kate nodded, feeling her heart beat faster. She stood up, throwing the tray on the table, and walked towards the exit, ignoring Tess's gaze. Her steps were fast, almost panicky, as if she could run away from what was waiting for her in hall number 3. The group therapy room was the same as yesterday, a circle of chairs, soft lights, a board that said, "Honesty is the first step." But today Kate felt different. Yesterday she was new, a stranger, and today she was part of this circle, and it was scary. The women were already sitting, talking in whispers, and Kate took the same chair as yesterday, away from the others. Tess sat opposite her, her eyes sparkling with curiosity, and Rose, the woman with the scar, gave Kate a cold look that clearly said, "I remember what you said." Dr. Harper was the last to enter, her linen shirt today blue and her gray hair pulled back into a low bun. She smiled at the group, but her gaze was sharp, as if she could see every thought hidden behind their faces. "Good morning," she said, sitting in a circle. "Today we will continue to talk about solutions, but I want to dig deeper. Not just what you did, but why. What motivated you? Who wants to start? Kate clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't want to talk, but she knew Harper wouldn't let her keep silent. Rose raised her hand, her voice was firm, but there was pain in it. I stole because I wanted my children not to starve, she said, but I didn't think I'd get caught. I thought I was smarter. It was pride, doctor. I wanted to be a hero, but I became a criminal. Harper nodded, her face thoughtful. Pride, she said. That's a strong word, Rose. Thank you. Who's next? Tess raised her hand, her grin almost defiant. I am, she said. I sold illegal substances because it was easy. Money, power, respect. I didn't think about who I was selling to. I didn't care. This is selfishness, perhaps. Kate looked at her, surprised by her directness. Tess seemed to be the one who always kept a mask, but now her voice was sincere. Harper nodded, her gaze moving to Kate. Caitlin, she said, her voice soft but insistent, you said yesterday that you deceived your husband. Do you want to continue? What motivated you? Kate froze, her breathing becoming uneven. She felt like everyone's eyes were on her, and it was like standing naked on stage. She wanted to lie, to say something neutral, but Harper's words hit home, and she realized that she couldn't remain silent. Ambition, she said finally, her voice hoarse. I wanted to be someone, not just a wife, not just a manager. I wanted power, and I thought Matt was an obstacle. Rose snorted, her gaze filled with contempt. Obstacle? She asked again. You said he was good. How can a good husband be an obstacle? Kate turned to her, her cheeks flushed. Because he was too good, she said, her voice becoming louder. He was happy with our life, the house, dinner, his drawings, and I wanted more. I wanted an office, a campaign, people who look at me like a star. And he didn't understand it. The hall fell silent, and Kate felt her words hang in the air, heavy as desert dust. Harper looked at her, her eyes intent. You say power, she said, but it's more like envy. What did you want to be, Caitlin? And why did you think Matt was in the way? Kate pursed her lips, her fingers digging into the edge of the chair. She remembered the day she got promoted to Bright Horizon. The office was noisy, phones were ringing, colleagues were running around with folders, and she was sitting at her new desk large, overlooking the city. Her boss, Dan Wilson, walked in without knocking, his dark suit immaculate and his smile predatory. Congratulations, Kate, he said then, sitting down on the edge of her desk. You are now a manager. But this is just the beginning. Do you want more? She looked at him, her heart pounding. His eyes dark, with a slight sparkle promised everything she wanted. Power, success, a life where she is not just Caitlin Reed, an engineer's wife. I want, she said, her voice firm. What needs to be done? He smiled, his hand lightly touching her shoulder. Be prepared to take risks, he said, and trust me, we'll make you a star. Kate blinked as she walked back into the therapy room. Harper was still looking at her, waiting for an answer. I wanted to be like him, Kate said, her voice quiet, but there was pain in it. My boss, Dan, he was everything I wanted to be. Confident, rich, respected, and I thought Matt was pulling me back, that I would be better without him. Tess whistled, her gaze a mixture of surprise and mockery. Seriously, she said, did you set up your husband for some boss? Was this love? Kate turned to her, her eyes sparkling. This is not love, she said, her voice breaking. It was like an illegal substance. He made me feel like I could do anything, and I believed it. Harper raised her hand, her gesture calm. Caitlin, she said, you used the word manipulation for what you did to Matt. But who manipulated you? Dan? Or did you convince yourself? Kate froze, her breathing became heavy. She remembered evenings at the office when Dan would stay late, pouring her whiskey and talking about her potential. You can be more, Kate, he said one day, his voice low, almost hypnotic. But you need to get rid of what's holding you back. Matt is a good guy, but he's not the one for you. You're a star, and stars don't live in the suburbs. She nodded then, her fingers tightening around her glass. His words were like poison, sweet and deadly, and she drank them, not noticing how they poisoned her. I myself, Kate said finally, her voice almost a whisper. Dan pushed, but I wanted it. I wanted to believe that he was right. Harper nodded, her face thoughtful. This is an important step, she said. Recognize that you made a choice. But I want you to think, what have you lost, Caitlin? Not a house, not money, but inside yourself. What have you left behind? Kate closed her eyes, feeling tears burning her eyelids. She remembered the morning when Matt had made her coffee, standing at the stove in their small kitchen. His hair was disheveled, and there was a sauce stain on his t-shirt, but he smiled as if it was the best day of his life. You look beautiful today, he said, placing the mug in front of her, as always. She rolled her eyes then, but felt warm inside. This was what she lost: his warmth, his love, his faith in her. And now, sitting in this room, she realized that she would never get it back. I lost myself, she said, her voice trembling, who I was with him, and I don't know how to find her. The session ended, but Kate felt as if she had been turned inside out. She left the hall, ignoring the looks of Tess and Rose, and went to her room, where she collapsed on the bed. Her thoughts swirled around Dan, Matt, the day she first felt there could be more. The sun in Phoenix was already beating down mercilessly, turning the courtyard of St. Mary's Haven into a hot frying pan. Caitlin sat on a bench near an old cactus whose spines cast long shadows on the cracked asphalt. She clutched a plastic bottle of water in her hands, but did not drink. She simply twisted it, listening to the liquid splashing inside. Her thoughts were somewhere far away in the past, which she tried to lock away, but which crawled out like sand through her fingers. Today's group therapy appointment for noon loomed ahead like a storm cloud, and Kate knew Dr. Harper would get her talking again. Yesterday was the first time she admitted that she manipulated Matt, but that was just the beginning. Today she would have to dig deeper, and just thinking about it made her palms sticky with sweat. She glanced at the shelter building white walls, red tiles, windows behind which silhouettes of women flashed. Some of them, like Tess, seemed like they belonged here, but Kate still felt like an outsider. Her roommate tried to get her to talk last night, but Kate brushed it off, not wanting to share. However, Tess's words, "At least you're honest," stuck in my head like a thorn. Honest. The word sounded like a mockery. She was everything but honest when she made her plan against Matt. "Hey, Reed," the voice of Marge, the administrator, pulled Kate out of her thoughts. She turned around and saw a woman walking across the yard with a tablet in her hands. "Group in 10 minutes. Hall number 3. And don't be late. Harper doesn't like to wait." Kate nodded, her throat dry despite the bottle in her hands. "I'm coming," she said, standing up. Her sneakers squeaked on the asphalt, and she walked towards the entrance, feeling her heart beating faster. She didn't want to go back to that room. She didn't want to sit under the gaze of other women again, but she had no choice. This was her new prison without bars, but with invisible chains. Room 3 was hot, despite the humming air conditioner. The plastic chairs stood in a circle, as always, and a new inscription appeared on the board. "Responsibility is a choice." Kate took her usual chair in the corner, away from the others, and crossed her arms over her chest, trying to hide the trembling in her fingers. Tess was already here, chatting with Rose, the woman with a scar who had judged Kate yesterday for her words about Matt. Their eyes met and Rose frowned, but said nothing. Kate turned away, feeling her cheeks burn. Dr. Harper walked in with a clipboard in her hands, her blue linen shirt slightly wrinkled and her gray hair pulled back into a messy bun. She smiled at the group, but her eyes were sharp as a blade, and Kate felt them linger on her a little longer. "Good afternoon," Harper said, sitting in the circle. "Today we are talking about responsibility, not about the wine, but about what you chose to do and why. Who will start?" A woman named Leela, thin with a rose tattoo on her wrist, raised her hand. Her voice was quiet, almost trembling. "I was imprisoned for fraud," she said. "She deceived old people, lured them out of their savings. I knew it was bad, but I wanted quick money. It was my choice, and I now live with it." Harper nodded, her face thoughtful. Thank you, Leela, she said. Recognizing a choice is a step. How did you feel when you made this decision? Leela shrugged, her eyes drooping. Power, she said, like I'm smarter than everyone else. But then, only shame. Kate flinched, the word power hitting her like a slap in the face. She remembered how this feeling dizzying, intoxicating had taken over her when she first decided to cross the line with Matt. It didn't happen all at once, not in one day, but gradually, like poison that drips into the blood. Caitlin, Harper's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. Yesterday, you talked about manipulation. Do you want to continue? When did you first make the choice that brought you here? Kate clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't want to talk, didn't want to open this wound in front of everyone, but Harper's gaze was unforgiving. It wasn't just one moment, she said finally, her voice hoarse. It accumulated. I started small, from lies, and then I moved on. Tess leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Lies? She asked again. Like, she said that she was late at work, but she was walking somewhere. Kate shook her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. Not really, she said. I started giving him sleeping pills, in coffee, in cocktails, so that he would sleep while I did my business. The hall fell silent, and Kate felt the air become heavy. Rose looked at her eyes widened in shock. Did you bully your husband? She asked, her voice sharp. Lord, who are you? Kate turned to her, her cheeks flushed, but she didn't look away. I didn't poison, she said, her voice breaking. It was so that he would not interfere. I didn't want to kill him. Harper raised her hand, her gesture calm but firm. Rose, we don't judge, she said. Caitlin, tell me more. How did you feel when you did this? When did you first decide? Kate closed her eyes, her breathing becoming uneven. She remembered that evening ordinary, stuffy, like all evenings in Phoenix. Matt sat at the kitchen table, checking blueprints, his pencil gliding across the paper with practiced precision. She stood at the stove, stirring pasta sauce, but her mind was elsewhere. In the office where Dan had just praised her presentation, calling her a future star. His words were like sparks igniting a fire inside her. Kate, are you okay? Matt asked, looking up from the blueprints. His voice was soft, but there was anxiety in it. You're kind of distant. She smiled, but the smile was forced, like a mask. It's okay, she said, turning to him. I'm just tired. Job. He nodded, his eyes full of trust, and it cut her like a knife. She hated this trust. It made her plan easier, but at the same time harder. In her bag, hidden in a drawer, there were pills, sleeping pills, which Dan got through some acquaintance. Safe, he said, just to keep him out of your business. Would you like some coffee? She asked. Her voice was even, almost affectionate. Matt smiled, his face softening. Yes, that would be great, he said. You're the best, Kate. She turned away so he wouldn't see her lips twitch. She poured coffee into the pot, added water, and then, while he wasn't looking, threw half a tablet, crushed into powder, into his mug. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. It wasn't murder, she told herself. It was management, control. Caitlin. Harper's voice brought her back into the hall. Are you with us? Kate blinked, feeling sweat running down her temple. Yes, she said, her voice hoarse. I felt strong, like I can do anything. It was like a game. I knew it was wrong, but I thought I was in control. Leela, the woman with the tattoo, looked at her eyes full of sympathy. It's like my fraud, she said quietly. At first it seems that you are smarter than everyone else, and then everything collapses. Kate nodded, her throat tightening. She remembered how Matt drank coffee, how his eyes began to droop after half an hour. He apologized, said he was tired, and went to bed. And she sat at the table, looking at his empty mug, and felt the adrenaline pumping into her veins. It worked. She could do anything. It was the first time, she said, her voice almost a whisper. Then it became easier. I did this a couple more times when he started asking questions. Why am I late? Who am I with? I... I wanted him to just sleep. Tess whistled, her gaze a mixture of surprise and admiration. Damn, Reed, she said. You look like something out of a series about villains. So what? He didn't notice anything. Kate shook her head, her eyes drooping. He trusted me, she said. It was the worst thing. He didn't even suspect. Harper leaned forward, her voice softening. You're talking about control, she said, but it's more like fear. What were you afraid of, Caitlin? What will he find out? Or that you yourself won't be able to stop? Kate froze, her breathing became heavy. She remembered the evening at the office when Dan first suggested that she move on. They were sitting in his office, the blinds were drawn, and there was a bottle of whiskey on the table. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top button, and he was looking at her with that same predatory smile that always made her heart beat faster. Are you ready for more, Kate? He asked, pouring her whiskey. I can open doors for you, but you need to be free, fully. She took a sip, feeling the warmth spread down her throat. What do you mean? She asked, although she already knew the answer. He leaned closer, his hand touching her knee. Matt, he said, he's pulling you back. You can be a star, but not with him. We can arrange everything. You will get a house, money, and freedom. And he won't even understand what happened. She laughed then, but the laugh was nervous, almost hysterical. Are you serious? She asked. This is crazy, Dan. He smiled, his eyes sparkling. It's crazy to sit in the suburbs and dream big, he said. I know what you want, and I can give it. Trust me. Kate blinked as she walked back into the therapy room. Harper was still looking at her, waiting for an answer. I was afraid he would stop me, she said finally, her voice trembling. That he will see who I am becoming. And I didn't want him to see it. Harper nodded, her face serious. This is an important step, she said. Admit the fear, but I want you to think, who were you becoming, and was it worth it? Kate didn't answer, her eyes dropped. She remembered how Dan hugged her in that office, how his hands squeezed her waist, and she felt alive, needed, strong. It was like an addiction, and she couldn't stop. After the session, Kate walked out into the yard, feeling her legs give way. She sat down on the same bench by the cactus, her hands shaking. Tess caught up with her, holding a cigarette in her hands, which she had obviously stolen from one of the volunteers. There you go, Reed, she said, lighting a cigarette. You poisoned your husband, and now you're sitting here as if nothing happened. Do you even regret it? Kate looked at her. Her eyes were cold, but there was pain in them. I'm sorry, she said, but that doesn't change anything. He hates me, and I deserve it. Tess exhaled smoke, her gaze becoming thoughtful. Maybe he hates it, she said. But you are here, not there. Maybe all is not lost yet. Kate snorted, but her throat tightened. Lost, she said. I ruined everything, Tess. And I don't know how to fix it. Tess shrugged, putting out her cigarette on the bench. Start with the truth, she said. That's all you have. Kate didn't answer as she watched the sun rise higher, flooding the courtyard with golden light. She thought about Matt, about the way he looked at her when she served him that coffee. And for the first time in years, she felt that the truth was not just words, but a knife that she had thrust into herself. Dr. Harper's office was as cozy as the first day, but today Kate felt like she was being interrogated. The rain pattered against the windows, creating a rhythm that only increased her nervousness. Harper sat across from her, her blue shirt replaced with a gray one and her gray hair pulled back into a tight bun. She held the notebook but didn't open it, just looked at Kate with the same soft but insightful smile. Caitlin, she said, her voice warm but firm. You took a big step yesterday by talking about sleeping pills. I see that it's hard for you, but you continue to talk. This is power. Today, I want us to go further. Tell me about what became the point of no return, the moment when you realized you couldn't back down. Kate clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't want to remember that night, the night when everything fell apart, when she crossed the last line. But Harper's gaze was unforgiving, and Kate knew that remaining silent would not work. That was the night When I called the police, she said, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper, I gave him sleeping pills as usual, but this time I wanted it to look like he beat me. Harper leaned forward, her eyes intense. Tell me how it was, she said. Not just facts, but how you felt. What did you see, hear, feel? Kate closed her eyes, her breathing becoming uneven. She remembered that evening the smell of orange juice mixed with rum, the creaking of the wooden floor in their living room, the distant hum of the air conditioner. Matt entered the house, his jacket slightly damp from the evening dew, and his face tired but calm. She stood at the table, holding 2 glasses of cocktail, and her heart was pounding so hard that she was afraid he would hear it. Hello, she said then, her voice soft, almost affectionate. I made a cocktail. Orange with rum. Shall we have a drink before we start? Matt looked at her, his eyebrows raised slightly. Where are the documents? He asked, putting the glass on the table. Let's sign and get this over with. She shrugged, her smile widening, almost mocking. Take your time, she said, taking a sip from her glass. We've been together for so many years, Matt. Let's talk. Then you will sign. He hesitated, but her gaze soft, almost pleading, made him give in. He raised the glass to his lips and took a sip. Kate watched his throat move. His eyes began to blur after a couple of minutes. She felt the adrenaline pumping into her veins, her fingers trembling with excitement. This was it, the moment when she had everything under control. Caitlin. Harper's voice brought her back to the office. How did you feel when he drank? Kate opened her eyes. Her cheeks were wet, although she didn't notice when she started crying. I felt power, she said, her voice shaking. It's like I'm a god. I could do anything to him, and he wouldn't even know. It was intoxicating. But at the same time, I was afraid. I was afraid that he would wake up, that he would understand. Strength and fear, she said. This is a powerful mixture. What happened next? Kate swallowed, her fingers gripping the edge of the chair. She remembered how Matt collapsed on the couch, his breathing slow, almost inaudible. She stood over him, looking at his face calm, trusting, even in his sleep. Her heart sank, but she drove away this feeling like an annoying fly. She knew Dan was already on his way. They planned everything. He would leave marks on her body. She would call the police, and Matt would become a monster in everyone's eyes. The door slammed and Dan walked in, his black shirt slightly wrinkled and his eyes sparkling with excitement. Did he pass out? He asked, glancing at Matt. Like a baby, Kate replied, her voice filled with contempt. I didn't even understand what happened. Dan walked up to her, his hand lay on her waist, squeezing her roughly. You're so damn good, he said, his voice hoarse. Let's have some fun while he sleeps. Kate laughed. Her laugh was harsh, angry, and she pushed him towards the couch where Matt was lying. They collapsed next to each other, not caring that he was a meter away from them. Dan was rough, his fingers leaving red marks on her neck, arms, thighs. She didn't resist. It was part of the plan. Stronger, she said, her voice full of challenge. Let them think it's him. You're sick, Dan said, laughing. And I like it. Kate blinked as she walked back into the office. Her cheeks were flushed and tears streamed down her face, leaving a salty taste on her lips. I was, like in a trance, she said, her voice hoarse. I didn't think about him, about Matt. I was only thinking about how it would work. How will I come out of this as a winner? Harper looked at her, her eyes full of sympathy, but there was steel in them. The winner? She asked again. And how did you feel when Dan left and you stayed with Matt? Kate pursed her lips, her fingers digging into the chair. She remembered Dan leaving, slamming the door, leaving her in the living room. She stood over Matt, looking at his face, and suddenly felt something inside breaking. His breathing was so weak that for a second she was afraid that she had overdone it. But he was alive, and she forced herself to move. She picked up the phone, dialed 911, and her voice, when she spoke, was perfectly shaky, full of fake panic. Please help, she said then. My husband, he beat me. I'm afraid for my life. Come soon. She dropped the phone and locked herself in the bedroom. her heart pounding and her hands shaking. She heard Matt wake up, screaming, knocking on the door, but she didn't open it. She waited for the police, knowing that everything was going according to plan. I felt empty, Kate said, her voice almost a whisper. It's like I'm not human. I did it and I knew it would work, but I didn't feel anything, only fear that I will be caught. Harper nodded, her face thoughtful. Emptiness, she said. This is an important word, Caitlin. You say you were afraid you'd get caught, and you were caught. What happened next? Kate swallowed, her eyes drooping. She remembered how the police burst into the house, how Matt screamed that he was innocent, how the officers handcuffed him. She stood in the bedroom, her face pale, and the marks on her neck and arms the perfect proof. But then everything went wrong. Record. Matt's phone, which he turned on before entering. Her voice, Dan's laughter, her fake call to the police, it was all on tape. I was arrested, she said, her voice hoarse. They found the recording. I thought I had everything under control, but I was wrong. Harper leaned forward, her voice softening. How did you feel when you realized that the plan had failed? She asked. Kate closed her eyes, her tears flowing faster. Rage, she said. On Matt, on Dan, on myself. I thought I was smarter than everyone else, but I was. Stupid, and I knew that I had lost everything. Harper nodded, her face serious. This is a big step, Caitlin, she said. We'll come back to this, but I want you to think, what were you trying to prove that night? Not Matt, not Dan, but himself. Kate didn't answer, her eyes were full of tears. She didn't know what she wanted to prove, that she is strong, that she can do anything, or that she's not just a suburban engineer's wife. All she knew was that that night had ruined her life, and she couldn't turn back time. After the session, Kate went out into the yard, where the rain had already turned into a light drizzle. She sat down on the wet bench, not caring that her jeans would get wet, and stared at the puddles that reflected the gray sky. Tess found her a couple of minutes later, holding an umbrella, which she had obviously stolen from one of the volunteers. Are you officially crazy now? She asked, sitting down next to him. You sit in the rain, like in a melodrama. What did Harper do to you? Kate looked at her, her eyes red from crying. Turned me inside out, she said, her voice hoarse. I told her about that night, about everything. Tess whistled, her gaze becoming more serious. About how you set up your husband? She asked. Damn, Reed, you're really frostbitten. But you know, I respect that you're not lying. Kate snorted, but her throat tightened. This doesn't deserve respect, she said. I ruined his life, Tess. And yours. And I don't know how to live with this. Tess shrugged, her umbrella tilted slightly, and the drops fell on Kate's shoulder. Maybe you don't know, she said. But you are here, not there. And you're telling the truth. This is already something. Kate didn't answer, looking at the puddles where her reflection was blurry like her past. She thought about Matt, how he had screamed as he was led away in handcuffs. And for the first time in years, she felt that the truth was not only pain, but also an opportunity. There was a chance of what she didn't know yet, but there was one. The aroma of coffee, faint but persistent, made its way through the smell of dampness and disinfection in St. Mary's Haven. Caitlin sat at the corner table, clutching a mug one of the volunteers had placed in front of her. The morning was cool after yesterday's rain, and the light streaming through the windows seemed cleaner than usual, highlighting the dust particles dancing in the air. But Kate didn't notice this. Her mind was on her session with Dr. Harper the night before, where she'd talked about that night for the first time, about the rum cocktail, about Dan, about the fake call to the police. The words she had torn from her still echoed in her head, and every time she closed her eyes, she saw Matt's face, pale and full of disbelief, as the police led him away in handcuffs. There was another private meeting with Harper at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and Kate felt her stomach clench with anticipation. She knew the doctor would want to talk about prison, about the 6 years Kate spent behind bars, about what they did to her. This was the part of her story that she hated the most. Not because it was hard there, although it was, but because prison forced her to look at herself without masks, and she didn't like what she saw. The dining room door creaked open and Tess walked in, her red hair disheveled and her usual grin on her face. She plopped down opposite Kate, holding a tray of oatmeal and an apple, obviously stolen, as always. "Morning, Reed," she said, biting into her apple with a loud crunch. "You're like a ghost again." "I don't know," she said. "It's like I opened a wound, and now I don't know how to sew it up." And today she wants to talk about prison. I'm not ready. Tess laughed, but there was something warm, almost sympathetic, in her laughter. "Nobody's ready, Reed," she said, stirring the oatmeal. "Prison is like a meat grinder. You come out of there either broken or different. How did you come out?" Kate looked at her. Her eyes were cold, but there was pain in them. "Broken," she said quietly, "but I'm still trying to figure out who I am now." Tess nodded, her face becoming more serious. "That's already something," she said. "Most don't even try. Tell me how it was there. I was in prison for a couple of years, but you. 6 years is serious." Kate frowned, her fingers hovering over her mug. She didn't want to talk about prison, didn't want to go back to those concrete walls, but Tess looked at her with sincere interest, and Kate suddenly realized that her silence was only making everything worse. It was like living in a cage, she said, her voice low. "Every morning it's the same thing, getting up, checking, noise, and people. Women who either hate you or want something from you. I learned to keep my mouth shut, but it didn't always help." Tess whistled, her eyes sparkling. "Yeah," she said, "I know this movement. Were there any showdowns? You don't seem like the type to get into a fight, but who knows?" Kate chuckled, but her smile was bitter. "There was one," she said, "in the first month. I didn't know the rules yet, and I got caught." Tess leaned forward, her gaze becoming greedy. "Tell me," she said, "what's happened?" Kate swallowed, her eyes drooping. She didn't want to remember, but the words were already rushing out, as if someone had opened a floodgate. "One woman, Laura," she said. "She was, like the main one on the block. I decided that I was taking on too much. I just wanted to be left alone, but she hit me, and then everything got mixed up." Tess laughed. Her laughter was loud, almost delighted. "Seriously?" she said. "Did you hit her back? Reed, you are full of surprises." Kate shook her head, her face darkening. "It wasn't cool," she said. "I was sent alone for 2 weeks, and there I first realized what I had done, that I'm not just in prison, I'm there because I deserve it." Tess fell silent, her grin disappearing. She looked at Kate, and something like respect flashed in her eyes. "Hard," she said quietly. "But you know, being alone is like a mirror. Shows you everything you're hiding. What did you see there?" Kate pursed her lips, her fingers digging into her mug. She didn't want to answer, but Tess was right. Loner was a mirror, and what she saw broke her. "Myself," she said finally, "and what I did to Matt. I couldn't run away from it. Not there." Tess nodded, her face thoughtful. "Then you're already one step ahead," she said. "Most people don't look in that mirror. Go to Harper, Reed. She'll get the rest out of you." Kate didn't answer, but her throat tightened. She knew Tess was right, and it scared her more than she wanted to admit. Dr. Harper's office was warm, despite the rain outside. The lamplight cast soft shadows on the walls, and the smell of the herbal tea Harper had placed on the table mingled with the dampness of the air. Kate sat in a chair, her hands nervously fiddling with the hem of her t-shirt. Harper looked at her, her brown eyes attentive but not judgmental. "Caitlin," she said, her voice soft but firm, "you told me yesterday about the night when everything collapsed. It was a big step. Today I want to talk about what happened after, about prison. How have these 6 years changed you?" Kate clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't want to talk about prison, didn't want to go back to those years, but Harper's gaze was unforgiving. "It was like living in hell," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "Not because of the walls or the food, because of the people, and because of myself. I couldn't run away from what I did." Harper nodded, her face thoughtful. "Tell me," she said, "what was the most difficult? not physically, but inside. Kate closed her eyes, her breathing becoming uneven. She remembered the first day in prison, the smell of bleach, the clanking of bars, the screams of women in neighboring cells. She was placed in a communal block where 20 women shared a cramped space filled with anger and despair. She was new, and that made her a target. The hardest thing was surviving, she said, her voice quiet, not physically, but morally. Everyone knew why I was in prison. Slander, assassination attempt. They called me Snake, and I couldn't argue because they were right. Harper leaned forward, her voice softening. They tried you, she said, but how did you judge yourself? Kate swallowed, her eyes drooping. She remembered Laura, the woman with an eagle tattoo on her neck, who ruled the block like a queen. Laura was tall, with hard eyes and a voice that silenced everyone. In the first month, she decided that Kate was an easy target. Are you the one who framed your husband? Laura asked then, standing over Kate in the dining room. Her voice was low, menacing. Do you think you're special here? Kate looked at her heart pounding, but she forced herself to stand up straight. I just want to be left alone, she said, her voice firm despite her fear. Laura laughed. Her laughter was as cold as ice. At rest? She asked again. You're in prison, Snake. They don't leave you alone here. I judged myself. Like them, Kate said, her voice shaking. I hated myself. In solitary confinement, it was just me and my thoughts, and I couldn't pretend that it wasn't my fault. Harper nodded, her eyes full of sympathy. A single person is like a mirror, she said. What did you see in him? Kate pursed her lips, her fingers digging into her t-shirt. She remembered those 2 weeks' darkness, silence, only a faint light through the crack in the door. She sat on the cot, her cheek still hurting from Laura's blow, and thought about Matt. His eyes were full of pain when he was taken away, about his voice when he screamed that he was innocent. She couldn't escape it, and it broke her. I saw a traitor, she said, her voice almost a whisper, the woman who destroyed everything she had, and I couldn't forgive myself. Harper leaned forward, her voice softening. You say couldn't, she said. And now, how do you feel about that, Caitlin? Kate closed her eyes, her tears streaming down her cheeks. She remembered the letter she had written in prison not to Matt, but to his mother, Elizabeth. She sat in her cell, holding a cheap pen and a piece of paper, and wrote, pouring out everything that had accumulated. She asked for forgiveness, explained that she did not want to go so far that she lost herself. But she never sent it. The paper turned yellow in her drawer, but the words remained inside. I still hate her, Kate said, her voice shaking. But I'm trying to understand why she did it. And I want to be different. Harper nodded, her face serious. This is a big step, Caitlin, she said. Understanding is the beginning. We'll come back to this, but I want you to think, what did prison give you? Not a punishment, but a lesson. Kate didn't answer. Her eyes were full of tears. She didn't know what the prison gave her, but she felt that it was something heavy, like a stone, that she was still carrying. After the session, Kate walked out into the hallway, her legs shaking and her face wet with tears. She didn't want to go back into the room, didn't want to see Tess or the other women. Instead, she went into the yard, where the rain had already stopped, leaving puddles glistening in the sun. She sat down on the bench, her hands wrapped around her knees, and stared at the cactus, which seemed to be the only one who did not judge her. Tess found her half an hour later, holding a cigarette and an umbrella, which she never returned. You're here again, she said, sitting down next to him. Has Harper completely ruined you? You look like you're ready to run away. Kate looked at her, her eyes red but firm. I won't run away, she said, her voice hoarse. I'm tired of running. I told her about the prison, about being alone, about everything. Tess exhaled smoke, her gaze becoming thoughtful. Being alone is tough, she said. I've been there a couple of times. You feel as if you were buried alive. What did you do there to keep from going crazy? Kate chuckled, her smile bitter. I thought, she said, about Matt, about what I did to him, and, she wrote, a letter that was never sent. Tess raised her eyebrows, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. Letter, she asked again. To whom? To him. Kate shook her head, her eyes drooping. His mother, she said. I wanted to explain, ask for forgiveness. But I couldn't send it. I was scared. Tess nodded, her face serious. I understand, she said. But you know, maybe it's not too late. Write again. Send. Or don't send, but write. It helps. Kate looked at her, her throat tightening. She didn't know if she wanted to write, but Tess's words touched something inside. Maybe this was her chance not to fix it, but at least to start. Maybe, she said quietly. Let's see. Tess put out her cigarette on the bench and stood up, her grin returning. Go, read, she said. You are stronger than you think, and Harper knows it. Kate didn't answer as she watched Tess leave. The dim light of the lantern outside the window, St. Mary's Haven, cast trembling reflections on the walls of the room where Caitlin sat on her bed, clutching a tattered notebook. The night was quiet, only a weak wind rustled the leaves in the yard, and somewhere in the corridor a floorboard creaked under the footsteps of the night guard. Kate couldn't sleep. Her thoughts were like a swarm of bees, circling around yesterday's session with Dr. Harper. The story about prison, about being a loner, about an unwritten letter to Matt's mother stirred up something new in her, not just pain, but a desire to understand why she still clings to her past. She had group therapy at noon today, and then another meeting with Harper, and Kate knew the doctor would force her to dig deeper again. But now she felt she was ready, or at least wanted to be ready. The door to the room creaked and Tess entered, holding a mug of something that smelled like mint tea. Her red hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and there was a ketchup stain on her t-shirt. Apparently, she had stolen something from the kitchen again. She looked at Kate. Her grin was, as always, slightly mocking, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. Well, there you go, read, she said, sitting down on her bed. You sit with this book as if you were writing a novel. What's there? Secrets of your villainous soul. Kate looked at her, her lips twitching into a faint smile. Nothing like that, she said, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. Just trying to figure out what to write. Harper wants me to dig into the past, and I don't know where to start. Tess narrowed her eyes, sipping her tea. About prison, she asked. Yesterday you told me something about being alone. Tough topic. But judging by your appearance, there was something else there. Come on, lay it out. I'm your personal confessional. Kate snorted, but her fingers tightened on the notebook. Tess was right. Prison wasn't all about being alone and fighting with Laura. There was something else that she still couldn't get out of her mind. Something that changed her, made her feel for the first time that her actions had consequences for more than just her. There was one woman, Kate said, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. In prison. Her name was Mira. She couldn't stand it, and it broke me. Tess raised her eyebrows, her smirk disappearing. Couldn't stand it, she asked, leaning closer. You mean, what? Kate swallowed, her eyes drooping. She died, she said, in the 4th year of my term, and I saw it happen. Tess froze, her mug stopping halfway to her mouth. Damn, she said quietly. That's tough, read. Tell, if you want, of course. Kate looked at her, her throat tightening. She didn't want to tell, but Tess's words, simple, without judgment, were like permission. And Kate realized that she needed to say this in order to move on. She was my cellmate, Kate said, her voice shaking. Mira, she was about 30 years old, maybe a little more. She was imprisoned for theft, but she had problems. She often cried at night and talked about her daughter, who was taken to an orphanage. I tried not to interfere, but we still talked. Tess nodded, her face serious. And what happened? She asked. Why does she, you know? Kate closed her eyes, her fingers digging into her notebook. She remembered that day gray, with a smell of dampness in the block, with the screams of the guards echoing along the corridor. Mira sat on her bunk, her long black hair disheveled and her eyes empty, as if she had already gone somewhere where no one could reach her. Have you ever felt that everything was in vain? Mira asked then, Her voice was weak, almost lifeless. Kate looked at her, her heart sank, but she didn't know what to say. "Sometimes," she said, shrugging. "But we are here, Mira. You just have to hold on." Mira shook her head, her lips twitching into a bitter smile. "I can't," she said. "I don't see the point. My girl, she doesn't even remember me. And I'm not a person anymore." "I didn't have time," Kate said, her voice breaking. "I screamed, called the guards, but she died right there. And I couldn't do anything." Tess looked at her, her eyes full of shock. "Oh my God, Reed," she said quietly. It's not your fault. You couldn't know." Kate shook her head, her tears streaming down her cheeks. "I could talk to her," she said. "I could listen and not brush it off. But I was too busy with myself, my demons. And after that I cried for the first time. For real." Tess put the mug down, her face grim. "It broke you, didn't it?" she asked. "But you know you're still here. This means something." Kate didn't answer. Her fingers clenched her notebook. She thought about Mira. Dr. Harper's office was filled with soft light, despite the cloudy day. The smell of herbal tea mixed with the aroma of rain coming through the slightly open window. Kate sat in a chair, her hands nervously fiddling with the edge of the notebook she had brought with her. Harper looked at her, her brown eyes warm but persistent. "Caitlin," she said, her voice soft but firm, "what has changed in you over the years? What made you start looking for yourself?" Kate clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms. She didn't want to talk about Mira, didn't want to remember that night, but she knew Harper wouldn't let her get away with it. "There was a woman," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "Mira." Tosh swallowed, her eyes drooping. She remembered how after Mira's death she was transferred to another cell, but the shadow of that night remained with her. She began working in the prison library, a dusty room with shelves full of old books where she could hide from other prisoners. There she found a book about codependency, tattered, with torn pages. She read it at night, under the dim light of a lamp, and for the first time began to think that her actions were not just mistakes, but part of something larger. "I started reading," Kate said, her voice quiet. "In the library, a book about how people destroy themselves and others because they are looking for something they don't have. And I realized that this was about me. I was looking for power, success, but I lost myself." Harper nodded, her face thoughtful. "This is an important step," she said. "Understanding. But how did you feel when you read it? What made you continue?" Kate closed her eyes, her fingers clutching her notebook. She remembered a conversation with the prison chaplain, Father James, an older man with kind eyes and a voice that was as soothing as a warm blanket. She went to him a month after Mira's death, not knowing what she wanted, but feeling that she could no longer remain silent. "You look lost, Caitlin," Father James said then, sitting at the table in the small confession room. "What's eating you?" Kate looked at him, her throat tightening. I don't know who I am," she said, her voice shaking. "I did terrible things. And now I see that it didn't just kill him. It killed me." He nodded, his eyes full of sympathy. "You made a choice," he said, "but you're still here, and God sees it. What do you want now? Forget or redeem?" Kate shook her head, her tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know," she said. I want this to make sense. So that her death would not be just like that." Father James smiled, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Then start with the truth," he said. "Write it down, say it, and look for the light, Caitlin. It is there, even in the dark." Kate blinked as she walked back into the office. Her cheeks were wet, and the notebook was shaking in her hands. "I felt hope," she said, her voice hoarse, "for the first time in years, as if I could be different. Not the one who betrayed, not the one who broke everything, but I was afraid it was a lie." Harper nodded, her eyes full of warmth. "Hope and fear," she said. "This is a powerful mixture. You're talking about light. What did he mean to you?" Kate swallowed, her fingers digging into her notebook. She remembered how she started writing in the library, not letters, but notes, snippets of thoughts, confessions. She wrote about Matt, about Mira, about herself. It was like a confession that she couldn't say out loud. It was like an opportunity, she said, a chance to understand why I did it. And maybe become better, but I didn't know how. Harper leaned forward, her voice softening. "You've already started, Caitlin," she said. "You are here, you are talking. This is light. But I want you to think, what do you want to do with this hope? Not for Matt, not for Mira, but for myself." Kate didn't answer. Her eyes were full of tears. She didn't know what she wanted, but she felt that Father James was right. There was light, and she wanted to find it. The morning dawned as mercilessly clear as all April sunrises in Arizona, but in the air of St. Mary's Haven, there was a subtle change. Caitlin felt her skin as if the walls, saturated with other people's confessions, were breathing relief along with her. Late the night before, Dr. Harper signed off on the latest report. "I recommend that surveillance be removed. The patient independently adheres to the resocialization plan." Kate, catching her last name in the graduates column, felt a shiver similar to the first puff after a long fast. Freedom was no longer an abstract word, but a short, straight road that went beyond the gates of the shelter. Only she knew, taking a step was not enough. We needed one more, the most difficult one, to ask for forgiveness. In the empty reading room, she laid out yellow sheets of notepad and a thin ivory envelope on the table. The book Father James had once given him, Letters of Forgiveness. The spiritual practice of repentance lay open on the chapter, confessing to a man, not a wall. She didn't have a pen, but the ballpoint pen slid across the paper as if she knew the route. "Matt, I don't write to free myself. I'm not worthy of freedom. I am writing so that you know the whole truth, without cuts and without excuses. You were my home, and I set it on fire because I wanted applause. I lied, bullied, put on a show with the police and with the one I called my mentor. I turned your love into a weapon against you. You will not be forgiven," the echo of the cameras whispered to me. "I am ready to accept any of your answers. Silence, rage, legal action, whatever will allow you to live on. But if someday you can say, 'I no longer carry you on my shoulders,' this will mean that my letter is not an empty phrase. I'm leaving. I don't run and I don't hide. From tomorrow, I will live in the spiritual retreat center, Santa Clara Abbey, on the New Mexico border. There is no internet. The telephone is only for emergency calls. This is not an escape, but a path of silent labor that should replace my ability to speak. I leave the address of the abbess, Sister Iris. If you ever want to hear my apologies in voice, write to her. I cannot use mail without a blessing. I'm sorry that this letter is heavier than it should bear on one soul, but I have no other soul. Caitlin." She reread the lines aloud quietly, as if she was afraid that the echo would return something unnecessary. No pathos, no cheap metaphors, just facts and a request. Kate folded the sheets, put them in an envelope, and sealed them with her steamed finger. On the back I wrote the address: Matthew Reed, Co-Harper Lansing Engineering, Temp, Arizona. Tess met her at the coffee machine. "You're kind of transparent," she said, clicking the plastic glass. "You look like a backpack of bricks fell off your shoulders." "Not bricks. Stones," Kate corrected and showed the envelope. "I'm going to the post office." Tess whistled. "Forgiveness. Hold on. I found a rehabilitation stronger than your cigarettes." Kate smiled. "Monastic retreat. Monastery light, without vows, but with dawn masses and field beds, and with a long silence. I am needed there more than here." Tess lit a cigarette and squinted through the smoke. "If one day you want to talk again, I'll leave my address. And if you don't want to, I understand. But you're not a snake anymore, Reed. Remember this." Kate nodded. Snake, the brand Laura had given her in her first month in prison, was finally coming off like an old tattoo. The Phoenix post office hummed with air conditioning. The glass ceiling shimmered with heat, but the stamp rack smelled cool, like a prison library. She bought a forever stamp with a desert landscape as a sign, Memory will survive distance. When the envelope disappeared into the crack of the drawer, Kate's knees went weak. The letter seemed to have absorbed some of her blood. A second, and the paper no longer existed for her. The pain is close, but there is no turning back. That evening, Marge handed out a travel kit. 3 packages of bulgur, a flask, a voucher for a Greyhound bus to Las Cruces, and a certificate of completion of the program. Your retreat center is called. They said come at 6 in the morning. Before dawn, the brothers read lauds. Do you know what this is? Psalms of the sunrise. I read, Kate replied. The administrator nodded in surprise. You're already talking from there. Rest before the journey. The climate there is stricter than ours. The desert is colder at night. Kate thanked. She found Tess in the room. She was getting dressed for the night shift in the laundry. I'll take your bookshelf for myself, the neighbor warned. And the letter, I hope it arrives. Keep in mind, mail in the USA works, but miracles are slower. I'll wait, Kate replied. They hugged awkwardly, like people who lived through the same war in different trenches. If you ever need a parole lawyer, write me, Tess joked through her hoarse laughter. It's better to write how you live, without trial or surveillance. The bus left Phoenix at 1:40. Outside the window, the saguaro vines looked like black torches under the moon, and the thermometer on the dashboard read 80 degrees Fahrenheit, although it was the dead of night. Kate clutched the voucher as if it might disappear. The interior smelled of plastic seats and late-night coffee. An old man in a Diamondbacks baseball cap dozed nearby, and across the aisle sat a mother with a teenager immersed in headphones. A world that lived at its own speed. The silence of the bus was reminiscent of a solitary cell, but without the echo. Instead of walls, there is a desert. Instead of a castle, there is a common path. Kate closed her eyes. She dreamed of a walk along a lavender field. She had once seen these photographs of French Provence and dreamed of a route for Instagram. In the dream, the lavender became ashy, as if it had burned out. Matt stood in the center of the field, not accusing, not angry, just tired. He held the letter, and a single line was written in his handwriting. I hear. She woke up to the bus slowing down, Las Cruces downtown. The pink sky was just beginning to illuminate the Organ Mountains. An old pickup truck with an emblem picked her up from the bus station, Santa Clara Abbey Retreat, New Mexico. Sitting behind the wheel was Brother Dominic, a man of about 60, with thick eyebrows and the same eyes that I had seen on James's father, deep, attentive, but not digging. Sister Iris said that you are coming to us for 6 months, he asked as he easily pulled out onto I-10. Yes, perhaps longer if accepted. I want to work off sin through silence and labor. Brother Dominic nodded without asking any further questions. We call it a place of peace. People come here to hear themselves, but leave when they hear silence. It's louder than thoughts if you give it time. The word sounded like an oath. Kate nodded, feeling the warmth in her chest. Santa Clara Abbey, a former Spanish mission of the late 19th century, which survived in the sand thanks to an underground spring. A white bell tower, low-covered arcades, a vegetable garden with rows of chili peppers and mint bushes along the wall. On the board at the entrance, there are rules for residents. 5:15 wake up and lauds. 7 o'clock breakfast silent. 8 o'clock, 12 o'clock garden carpentry work. 12:15 divine reading scripture or any classics. 13 o'clock lunch, 3 minutes, word of the day, then silence. 14 o'clock, 17 o'clock service, kitchen, laundry, library. 18 o'clock dinner. 20 o'clock evening prayer and silence until dawn. Sister Iris, a thin woman with silvered hair and hands smelling of basil, handed Kate a canvas bag with work clothes and led her to the door of the cell room. They don't change our name, she said, reading her profile, but sometimes a person himself chooses a short word to remind him why he is here. Kate thought about it. Veritas, truth, she said. It's fine, the sister nodded. See you in the garden. There the ground is harder than it seems, but it gives way to those who ask for patience. The room was tiny, A narrow bed, a table, a crucifix on the wall, and a small window overlooking a courtyard with orange trees. There were no mirrors or sockets. The silence thickened, but it did not oppress, but enveloped me like a blanket smelling of the sun. Kate took out a notepad. On the first blank page I wrote, Day 1, I am Veritas. The garden was rocky, but Brother Dominic gave her a hoe and showed her how to loosen the soil while whistling Amazing Grace. In the wormwood air, every breath seemed like a step toward simplicity. The earth was dry, stubborn just like herself. By lunchtime, my hands were burning, there was red dust under my nails, but my chest was quiet. At the table, she heard only the sound of wooden spoons on bowls and a short word of the day from Brother Leon, Mercy, mercy. In the library after lunch, Sister Iris entrusted her with a catalog of old letters and diaries. Kate opened the first drawer and found a yellowed envelope with a scrawl dated 1948. Forgiven, not forgotten. The words burned. She remembered her envelope already flying through the sorting centers. A letter is like a seed. Whether it sprouts or not depends on the soil. But now she knew. She had no right to wait for the harvest. In the evening, she sat in her cell, knees tucked, palms smelling of mint, and wrote again not to Matt, but to herself. Veritas, Day 1. To work is to pray with your hands. The earth accepts pain and returns it with sprouts. I don't run, I stay. If the letter is returned with the note, the addressee refused, I will still water the beds. Outside the window, the desert was darkening, and stars, which are not visible in cities, poured out over the roofs of the monastery cold, countless, like the seconds that she still had to live. After a week, the routine became flesh, getting up before dawn, prayer, silence. The body got used to the weight of the fork, to fatigue without hysteria. Inside, the repressive voice of the snake died down. It was drowned out by the buzz of the swarm hive in her head, when in the evenings she read Psalm 130 aloud, barely moving her lips. From the depths I call to you. Tess wrote a card. On the front side, there is a cactus in a cowboy hat and a signature, Stay Sharp. Alive. I found a job in a car repair shop. Surprisingly, oil dirt washes off more easily than prison dust. If you decide that you are ready to talk, I'm in touch. T. Kate smiled and placed the card next to the crucifix. The third week brought a letter from Phoenix. The abbess handed it over at the morning meal, covering it with her palm like a shield. The envelope was clean without a return address. One sheet inside. The handwriting is recognizable. Matt wrote like engineers clear, slanted letters, as if drawn with a ruler. Kate, I read your letter 3 times before I managed to turn off my anger. You're right. I hated you. I hated the smell of coffee, the sound of the turka, and any traces of the past. But after years, the hatred grew tired. You ask what will happen if I do let go. Don't know. Did I remarry? No. But I learned to sleep. No sleeping pills. Without fear. I'm not ready to meet, to hear your voice. Maybe I never will. But I realized, hatred is also a chain. You took one off. I have to take mine off. Let our future be 2 roads, and on each there are fewer lies than there were. You asked if I needed your address. I'll write it down, but I don't promise to use it. I hear. M. Kate closed her eyes. The words cut and healed at the same time. He didn't forgive, but he didn't reject either. The chain has become loose. She folded the sheet, hid it between the pages of Augustine's Confessions, and went to the chapel. A light scent of incense greeted her as she knelt before the altar. Thank you, Kate whispered, because he can still hear. The months dragged on one after another. She learned to be silent more deeply, without internal monologue, without calculating how much repentance is enough for me. She worked in the carpentry shop, whittling boards for new hives, and the smell of resin seemed to be the best smell in the world. Sometimes Brother Dominic read letters that came from former residents. Some returned to the family, some opened a diner, some went to Peru to build wells. Kate listened and found herself thinking that for the first time in many years, she did not think of the future as a pedestal. She thought of it as a garden that needed daily tending. In the 6th month, the abbess invited her to the library. Veritas, you have fulfilled the required minimum. According to the charter, you can leave or renew for an indefinite period. The choice is free. Kate looked at the cut light coming from the rose window and was surprised at how little doubt there was left. "I'll stay," she said, "until the silence says that I am ready to speak." Sister Iris smiled. "Silence does not speak loudly. Listen more carefully." Midnight. The communal candle in the chapel burned down to half. Kate sat on the bench, holding a second notebook covered in small handwriting. On the last page, there was a date and a single sentence, written in English by force of new habit. Forgiven, not forgotten, but both alive. She closed the book and inhaled the smell of wax. Matt's letter continued to live inside, like a quiet metronome. "I hear." It didn't mean "I forgive," but it meant "I'm alive." And she also lived where every morning began with a silent promise to the earth that today there would be fewer lies. Outside the window, the desert slept under the glow of the crescent moon. No bars, no guards, no loud promises of career heights, only the flannel sounds of cicadas and the whisper of the wind in the orange crowns. And this, for the first time in 12 years, was enough. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.